Roman Vale stood at the altar in a $10,000 suit, staring at the trembling woman who was supposed to save his empire. She wasn't what he expected, not even close. Her hand shook so hard the bouquet nearly fell, and when their eyes met, he saw something that made his chest tighten, pure, unfiltered terror. This wasn't a merger. This was a mistake. But the contract was signed, the guests were watching, and in his world, you didn't back out once the deal was done. What Roman didn't know was that the frightened girl in white would become the only person who could ever bring him to his knees. If you want to see how a ruthless king falls for the bride he never wanted, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. But the Vale estate sat on the edge of the city like a fortress, all black iron gates and stone walls that seemed designed to keep the world out. Roman Vale had bought it 6 years ago with money most people didn't ask questions about, and he turned it into exactly what it looked like. A kingdom for a man who ruled through fear, strategy, and an ironclad refusal to show weakness. He stood in front of the mirror in his bedroom, adjusting his cufflinks with the same precision he brought to every business deal. The suit was custom, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, tailored so perfectly it might as well have been a second skin. His reflection stared back at him, all sharp angles and cold eyes. 34 years old and already at the top of a world most people didn't even know existed. Behind him, his second-in-command, Marcus, leaned against the doorframe with his arms crossed. Marcus was older, scarred, and had been with Roman since the beginning. He didn't do sentiment, which made him the perfect person to stand in this room on a day like today. "You ready for this?" Marcus asked. Roman didn't turn around. "It's a contract. I've signed hundreds." "Yeah, but you don't usually have to sleep next to the other party." Roman's jaw tightened, but he didn't respond. The truth was, this marriage wasn't about romance or companionship. It was about power. The Hale family was old money, the kind with roots that went back generations. They had influence in places Roman couldn't touch, connections that opened doors his reputation alone couldn't budge, and they were drowning in debt. The arrangement had been simple. Roman would marry into the family, clear their debts, and in return, he'd get access to their network. It was strategic, clean, exactly the kind of move that had kept him alive this long. "What do you know about her?" Marcus asked. Roman finally turned. "Not much. Daughter, mid-20s, quiet, from what I've heard." "Quiet's good. Means she won't ask questions." Roman didn't answer. He wasn't interested in her personality. He was interested in what she represented, a key to the next level of power. Everything else was irrelevant. The ceremony was set for 2 p.m. at a private estate outside the city. Roman had wanted something small, but the Hales had insisted on a spectacle. Appearances mattered to them, even when they were selling off their daughter to cover their mistakes. The car ride was silent. Roman sat in the back of a black SUV, staring out the window as the city blurred past. Marcus drove, occasionally glancing in the rear-view mirror but saying nothing. There was nothing to say. When they arrived, the estate was already filled with guests. Roman recognized a few faces: business associates, politicians, people who operated in the same shadows he did. The Hales had invited their side too, old money types in expensive clothes who looked at Roman like he was something they'd stepped in. He didn't care. Let them look. In 6 months, they'd be coming to him for favors. The ceremony itself was set up in a garden behind the main house. White chairs lined a stone pathway, and at the end stood an arch wrapped in flowers that probably cost more than most people made in a year. It was all very traditional, very polished, and completely hollow. Roman took his place at the altar and waited. The music started, some classical piece he didn't recognize, and the guests turned in their seats. Roman kept his eyes forward, his expression unreadable. He'd been in boardrooms with men twice his age who tried to stare him down, and he'd never flinched. This was no different. Then the doors opened, and Serafina Hale stepped out. Roman's first thought was that she looked nothing like he'd expected. He'd pictured someone polished, controlled, maybe even a little cold. Someone who understood what this was and had made peace with it. But the woman walking toward him looked like she was being led to her execution. She was small, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pinned back in an elaborate style that didn't quite suit her. The dress was beautiful, lace and silk, fitted at the waist and flowing down to the ground, but it hung on her like a costume. Her face was pale, her lips pressed into a tight line, and her hands gripped the bouquet so hard her knuckles were white. And her eyes. When she looked up and met his gaze, Roman felt something he hadn't felt in years. Unease. She wasn't angry or resigned, she was terrified. The walk down the aisle felt like it took forever. Serafina's father had his arm linked through hers, guiding her forward with a firm grip that looked more like restraint than support. He was smiling, nodding at guests, playing the part of the proud father. Serafina wasn't smiling at all. When they reached the altar, her father placed her hand in Roman's and stepped back. Roman looked down at her, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't know what to do. Her hand was shaking. The officiant began speaking, some rehearsed speech about love and commitment that felt obscene under the circumstances. Roman barely heard it. He was too focused on the woman standing next to him, whose breathing was so shallow he thought she might pass out. "Do you, Roman Vale, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Roman's voice was steady. "I do." The officiant turned to Serafina. "And do you, Serafina Hale, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" There was a pause. Just a heartbeat, but long enough that Roman felt the tension ripple through the crowd. Serafina's lips parted, and her voice came out so quietly he almost didn't hear it. "I do." The officiant smiled. "Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Roman hesitated. It wasn't something he'd thought about, this part of the performance. But the guests were watching, and hesitation wasn't something he could afford. He leaned in, keeping it brief and impersonal. Her lips were cold, and she flinched when he touched her. It lasted less than 2 seconds, but it felt like the longest moment of his life. The guests applauded. Serafina pulled back immediately, her eyes fixed on the ground. The reception was worse. It was held in a massive ballroom inside the main house, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors. A live band played in the corner, and waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Roman and Serafina sat at the head table, side by side, but miles apart. She hadn't said a word since the ceremony. Roman watched her out of the corner of his eye. She barely touched her food, just pushed it around her plate with her fork. Her posture was rigid, her shoulders tense, and every time someone approached to offer congratulations, she forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You should eat something," Roman said quietly. She flinched at the sound of his voice, then glanced at him briefly before looking away. "I'm not hungry." Her voice was soft, almost fragile. It grated against everything Roman knew about survival. In his world, weakness got you killed. "People are watching," he said. "You look like you're at a funeral." Her hands tightened around her fork. "Maybe I am." Roman leaned back in his chair, studying her. There was a sharpness to that comment, a flicker of something underneath the fear. He wasn't sure if it was defiance or resignation. "This doesn't have to be difficult," he said. "We both know what this is. Play your part, and I'll play mine." Serafina turned to look at him then, really look at him, and for the first time he saw something other than fear in her eyes. It was sadness. Deep, aching sadness. "You don't know anything about me," she said quietly. Before Roman could respond, her father appeared at the table, all smiles and false warmth. He clapped Roman on the shoulder like they were old friends. "Roman, wonderful ceremony, wasn't it?" He didn't wait for an answer. "I just wanted to thank you again for everything. This alliance is going to be incredible for both our families." Roman nodded, his expression neutral. "That's the plan." Serafina's father turned to his daughter, and his smile faltered just slightly. "Serafina, you should go mingle. People want to congratulate you." "I'm fine here," she said, her voice barely audible. Her father's hand landed on her shoulder, and Roman saw her flinch again. The grip looked casual, but there was pressure behind it. "Go," her father said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Serafina stood without another word and walked toward the crowd. Roman watched her go, his jaw tight. "She's just nervous," her father said, sitting down in the chair she'd vacated. "Big day, you know, but she'll adjust. She's a good girl, obedient." Roman's eyes shifted back to the man beside him. "Obedient?" "Exactly. She knows her duty. You won't have any trouble with her." Roman didn't respond. He was beginning to realize that duty was a word people used when they wanted to dress up something ugly. The rest of the reception blurred together. Roman shook hands, made small talk, and played the role of the satisfied groom. But his attention kept drifting back to Serafina, who stood on the edge of the room like a shadow, her smile brittle, and her eyes hollow. By the time the last guest left, it was nearly midnight. Roman loosened his tie as he walked back into the main house, Marcus falling into step beside him. "Long day," Marcus said. "Yeah." "She seems quiet." Roman shot him a look. "That's one word for it." Marcus smirked. "Could be worse. Could have married someone who talks back." Roman didn't answer. They reached the grand staircase, and Marcus stopped at the bottom. "I'll be in the east wing if you need anything," he said. Roman nodded, then climbed the stairs alone. The master bedroom was at the end of the hall, a sprawling space with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the estate. Roman had barely spent any time in it. He usually worked late and crashed in his office, but tonight it had been prepared for two. The door was slightly ajar. Roman pushed it open and stepped inside. Serafina was standing by the window, still in her wedding dress. She hadn't turned on the lights, and the only illumination came from the moon outside. Her back was to him, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to make herself smaller. Roman closed the door behind him, and the sound made her jump. She turned quickly, her eyes wide, and for a moment neither of them moved. "I didn't mean to startle you," Roman said. She didn't respond, just stared at him like he was a stranger. Which, he supposed, he was. Roman crossed the room slowly, keeping his movements deliberate. He didn't want to spook her more than she already was. When he reached the bed, he shrugged off his jacket and draped it over a chair. "You should get some rest," he said. "It's been a long day." Serafina's hands twisted together in front of her. I know what's expected." Roman paused, his hands on his tie. "What?" "Tonight," she said, her voice trembling. "I know what's supposed to happen." Realization hit him like a punch to the gut. She thought, "I'm not going to touch you," Roman said flatly. She blinked, confusion flickering across her face. "But the contract—" "I don't care about the contract," he said, cutting her off. "Not tonight." Serafina stared at him, and Roman could see the disbelief in her eyes. She didn't trust him. He didn't blame her. "You can have the bed," he said, turning away. "I'll take the couch." "Why?" The question stopped him. He turned back to look at her, and the vulnerability in her expression was so raw it made something twist in his chest. "Because you're terrified," he said bluntly, "and I'm not that kind of man." It wasn't entirely true. Roman had done plenty of things that would horrify most people, but this, forcing himself on a woman who looked like she might shatter if he got too close, wasn't one of them. Serafina's eyes filled with tears, and she looked away quickly, like she was ashamed of them. Roman didn't know what to say. He wasn't good at this, at comfort, at softness. So he did the only thing he could think of. He grabbed a blanket from the bed and moved to the couch on the far side of the room. "Get some sleep," he said, his back to her. There was a long silence. Then quietly she whispered, "Thank you." Roman didn't respond. He lay down on the couch, staring up at the ceiling, and wondered what the hell he'd just gotten himself into. The next morning, Roman woke to sunlight streaming through the windows. His neck was stiff from the couch, and his shirt was wrinkled. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes, and looked toward the bed. Serafina was already awake, sitting on the edge of the mattress with her hands folded in her lap. She'd changed out of the wedding dress into something simpler, a pale blue dress that looked too big for her. Her hair was down now, falling in soft waves around her shoulders, and without all the makeup from yesterday, she looked younger. Fragile. "Morning," Roman said, his voice rough from sleep. She glanced at him briefly, then looked away. "Good morning." Roman stood and stretched, his joints popping. "You sleep okay?" "Not really." He wasn't surprised. He hadn't slept well either. There was a knock at the door, and a moment later a staff member entered with a breakfast tray. She set it down on the table by the window, gave a small curtsy, and left without a word. Roman gestured toward the food. "You should eat." Serafina stood and walked over slowly, like she wasn't sure if it was allowed. Roman followed, taking the seat across from her. The tray was loaded with pastries, fruit, coffee, and juice. Serafina picked at a croissant, tearing off small pieces but not actually eating them. "You don't have to be afraid of me," Roman said. Her eyes flicked up to his. "You say that like it's easy." "I'm not going to hurt you." "You don't know that." Roman frowned. "What's that supposed to mean?" Serafina set down the croissant and looked at him directly for the first time. You're Roman Vale. Everyone knows who you are, what you do. And what do I do? You destroy people. The words hung in the air between them, sharp and cutting. Roman leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. You're right, he said finally. I do, but only when they get in my way. And what happens when I get in your way? Roman studied her, this small, trembling woman who somehow had the nerve to challenge him. You won't. You don't know that either. She had a point. Roman didn't know anything about her, not really. And the more he looked at her, the more he realized she wasn't what he'd expected. There was something underneath the fear, something sharper, something that hadn't been completely broken yet. Why did you agree to this? He asked. Serafina's expression shifted, and for a moment he thought she might cry again. But she didn't. She just looked tired. Because I didn't have a choice, she said quietly. Roman wanted to press her, to ask what that meant, but before he could, Marcus knocked on the door and stepped inside. Boss, we've got a meeting in an hour. You need to get ready. Roman stood, glancing back at Serafina. We'll talk later. She didn't respond. As Roman left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just made a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The meeting Roman attended that morning lasted 3 hours and solved nothing. He sat at the head of a long table in a downtown office building, listening to men in expensive suits argue about territory disputes and profit margins while his mind kept drifting back to the pale woman sitting alone in his house. Marcus noticed. He always noticed. You good? He asked quietly while the others were arguing amongst themselves. Roman's jaw tightened. Fine. You don't look fine. You look distracted. I said I'm fine. Marcus raised his hands in surrender and leaned back in his chair. The meeting dragged on for another hour before Roman finally called it. He stood abruptly, cutting off someone mid-sentence. We're done here. Figure it out yourselves or don't. I don't care anymore. The room went silent. Roman didn't wait for a response. He walked out, Marcus trailing behind him. That was subtle, Marcus said once they were in the elevator. I've got more important things to deal with. Like your new wife? Roman shot him a look that could have melted steel. Marcus just smirked. When they got back to the estate, it was early afternoon. The house staff moved quietly through the halls, and everything looked exactly as Roman had left it that morning. Controlled, orderly, empty. He found Serafina in the library on the second floor. She was sitting in one of the leather armchairs by the window, a book open in her lap but her eyes staring out at the gardens. She looked small in that big chair, like a child playing dress-up in an adult's world. Roman stood in the doorway for a moment watching her. She hadn't noticed him yet, and he found himself studying the way the afternoon light caught in her hair, the way her fingers absently traced the edge of the book's cover. Then she turned and saw him, and her whole body went rigid. Sorry, Roman said. Didn't mean to startle you. It's your house, she said quietly. You don't need to apologize. He walked into the room, hands in his pockets. What are you reading? She glanced down at the book like she'd forgotten it was there. Just something I found on the shelf. I hope that's okay. It's fine. Read whatever you want. Read. Serafina nodded, but it didn't say anything else. The silence stretched between them, awkward and heavy. Roman wasn't used to this, to not knowing what to say, to feeling like every word might be the wrong one. Have you eaten? He asked finally. The staff brought me lunch. Did you eat it? She hesitated. Some of it. Roman sighed. You need to eat more than that. I'm not very hungry. You weren't hungry at breakfast either, or at the reception. Serafina's eyes dropped back to her book. I eat when I'm hungry. That's not what it looks like to me. Her head snapped up, and there was a flash of something in her eyes, anger, maybe, or frustration. Why do you care? The question caught Roman off guard. Why did he care? A week ago, he wouldn't have. A week ago, she was just a name on a contract, a means to an end. But sitting across from her now, seeing the exhaustion in her face and the tension in her shoulders, something had shifted. I don't know, he admitted. The honesty seemed to surprise her. She blinked, her expression softening slightly. At least you're honest about it. Roman sat down in the chair across from her. Can I ask you something? You're going to anyway. Fair point. Yesterday you said you didn't have a choice. What did you mean? Serafina's fingers tightened on the book. Does it matter? It might. She was quiet for a long time, staring down at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. My father gambled away everything. The house, the savings, all of it. And when that wasn't enough, he started borrowing from people who don't forgive debts. Roman's stomach sank. He knew exactly what kind of people she was talking about. He came to you, Roman said. No, he came to someone worse, someone who makes you look like a saint. That was saying something. Roman leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. And the marriage was his way out. It was the only way out. Your offer cleared the debt, and then some. All he had to do was hand over his daughter like she was part of the furniture. The bitterness in her voice was sharp enough to cut. Roman understood now why she'd looked so terrified at the altar. She hadn't been marrying him. She'd been sacrificing herself. What about your mother? He asked. Dead. Cancer 6 years ago. Siblings? A brother and a sister, younger, still in school. Roman sat back, processing this. So you did this to protect them. Wouldn't you? She looked at him directly, and the challenge in her eyes was unmistakable. If it was your family, wouldn't you do whatever it took? Roman thought about Marcus, about the few people in his life he actually gave a damn about. Yeah, he said, I would. Serafina seemed to deflate a little, like admitting all of this had taken something out of her. They don't know. My brother and sister, they think I wanted this, that it's some kind of fairy tale. And you let them believe that. What else was I supposed to do? Tell them their father sold me to save his own skin? Roman didn't have an answer for that. The two of them sat in silence, and for the first time since this whole arrangement started, Roman felt like he was seeing her clearly, not as a contract or a strategy, but as a person, someone who'd been backed into a corner and made the only choice she could. I'm sorry, he said. Serafina looked up, surprised. For what? For being part of this. For not asking more questions before I signed that contract. You didn't know. That's not an excuse. She studied him for a moment, and Roman couldn't read the expression on her face. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone crueler, someone who wouldn't care. Roman almost laughed. I've done plenty of cruel things, Serafina. Don't mistake last night for kindness. I just don't see the point in forcing something that neither of us wants. But the contract. Screw the contract, Roman said, his voice harder than he intended. I'm not going to touch you until you want me to. And if that never happens, then it never happens. Serafina's eyes went wide, and for a moment she looked like she might cry again. But she didn't. She just nodded, her throat working as she swallowed hard. Thank you, she whispered. Roman stood, needing to move, needing to do something with the restless energy building in his chest. You want to see the rest of the estate? What? You've been cooped up in here all morning. Come on, I'll show you around. Serafina hesitated, then set the book aside and stood. Okay. They walked through the house first, Roman pointing out rooms and giving brief explanations. The library, the sitting room, the dining hall that could seat 30 people but was almost never used. Serafina didn't say much, just followed him quietly, taking it all in. When they stepped outside, the afternoon air was cool and crisp. The estate grounds stretched out for acres, all manicured lawns and stone pathways. There was a garden on the east side, a small lake to the west, and beyond that, thick woods that provided privacy from the rest of the world. It's beautiful, Serafina said softly. It's isolated, Roman corrected. That's the point. They walked along one of the pathways, the gravel crunching under their feet. Serafina kept her arms wrapped around herself, even though it wasn't that cold. Do you ever get lonely here? She asked. Roman glanced at her. I don't have time to be lonely. That's not an answer. It's the only one I've got. They reached the garden, and Serafina stopped to look at the flowers. Roses, mostly, along with some other varieties Roman didn't know the names of. The gardener handled all of that. My mother loved roses, Serafina said. She used to grow them in our backyard, pink ones mostly. She said they reminded her of hope. Do they remind you of that? She shook her head. No, they just remind me of her. Roman watched as she reached out and touched one of the petals, her fingers gentle. There was something achingly sad about the gesture, and he found himself wishing he knew how to fix it. "You miss her," he said. "Every day." They stood there for a while, neither of them speaking. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it wasn't unbearable either. It was just quiet. Eventually, they started walking again. Serafina asked questions here and there about the house, about the grounds, about how long he'd lived here, and Roman answered as best he could. It felt strange, this normalcy, like they were just two people getting to know each other, instead of two strangers bound by a contract neither of them had really wanted. When they looped back toward the house, the sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, casting everything in shades of gold and amber. Serafina paused at the bottom of the steps leading up to the back entrance. "Thank you for this," she said, "for showing me around." "It's your home now too," Roman said. "You should know where everything is." She nodded, but there was something in her expression that told him she didn't quite believe it yet, that this place didn't feel like home, and maybe it never would. That night, they had dinner together in the smaller dining room. It was less formal than the grand hall, just a simple table with enough space for 6 or 7 people. The staff had prepared roasted chicken, vegetables, and fresh bread, and Roman made a point of actually sitting down to eat instead of working through the meal like he usually did. Serafina picked at her food again, but she ate more than she had the night before. Progress, Roman supposed. "Your father called today," Roman said. Serafina's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "What did he want?" "To check in, make sure everything was going smoothly." "What did you tell him?" "That everything was fine." She set her fork down, her appetite clearly gone. "He doesn't care, you know, about how I'm doing. He just wants to make sure you're not backing out of the deal." Roman didn't disagree. He'd gotten the same impression from the call. "When's the last time you talked to your brother and sister?" "A few days before the wedding. Why?" "You should call them. Let them know you're okay." Serafina looked at him like he'd just suggested something radical. "You'd let me do that?" "Why wouldn't I?" "Just thought." She trailed off, shaking her head. "Never mind." "Serafina, I'm not keeping you prisoner here. You can call whoever you want. Go wherever you want. I'm not your jailer." "Then what are you?" Roman considered that. "I don't know yet." She didn't push the issue, but he could see the wheels turning in her head. After dinner, she excused herself and went upstairs. Roman stayed in the dining room for a while, nursing a glass of whiskey and trying to make sense of the mess he'd walked into. Marcus found him there an hour later. "You look like hell," Marcus said, pouring himself a drink. "Thanks." "How's it going with the wife?" Roman shot him a look. "Don't call her that. What else am I supposed to call her? That's what she is." "She has a name." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Touchy. What happened to 'it's just a contract'?" "It's more complicated than that." "It always is." Marcus took a sip of his drink. "You know, for what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Last night, I mean, not pushing her." Roman frowned. "You were listening?" "I pay attention. It's my job." Marcus leaned against the table. "But seriously, boss, you're walking a tightrope here. You start caring too much, and it's going to cloud your judgment." "I'm not caring too much. I'm just not being a bastard." "Same thing, in our world." Roman didn't respond. He knew Marcus was right, but he also didn't care. There were lines he wouldn't cross, no matter how much it complicated things. Upstairs, Serafina stood by the window in the master bedroom, staring out at the dark grounds. She'd changed into a nightgown the staff had left for her, and her hair was loose around her shoulders. She looked tired, exhausted even. When Roman walked in, she didn't turn around. "You don't have to sleep on the couch again," she said quietly. Roman paused. "What?" "The bed's big enough, and that couch can't be comfortable." "I'm fine." "Roman." She turned to look at him, and there was something raw in her eyes. "I'm not afraid of you. Not anymore, not like I was." "You should be," he said before he could stop himself. "Why? Because of your reputation? Because of what people say you've done?" "Because it's all true." Serafina crossed the room slowly, stopping a few feet away from him. "I've spent my whole life being afraid of things I couldn't control. My father's debts, my mother's illness, losing my family, and now I'm here, in this house, with a man everyone says is dangerous. But you know what? You're the first person in a long time who's actually asked me what I want." Roman didn't know what to say to that. He just stood there, looking at this woman who somehow managed to be both fragile and fierce at the same time. "So no," she continued. "I'm not afraid of you, not the way you think." "Then what are you afraid of?" he asked. "That this is all temporary, that one day you'll realize I'm not worth the trouble and send me back." Roman's chest tightened. "That's not going to happen." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do." They stood there in the dim light, the space between them feeling both vast and impossibly small. Finally, Roman moved to the couch and grabbed the blanket he'd used the night before. "I'll take the couch," he said. "You need to sleep." Serafina looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just nodded and climbed into the bed, pulling the covers up around herself. Roman settled onto the couch, staring up at the ceiling. Across the room, he could hear Serafina's breathing, soft and uneven. It took a long time for either of them to fall asleep. The next few days settled into a strange routine. Roman went to his meetings and handled his business, and Serafina explored the house and grounds. They had breakfast together most mornings and dinner every night. The conversations were stilted at first, but gradually they started to flow a little easier. Serafina called her brother and sister, and Roman could hear the relief in her voice when they answered. She talked to them for over an hour, laughing at something her brother said and promising her sister she'd visit soon. When she hung up, there were tears in her eyes, but she was smiling. "They're okay," she said when Roman asked. "Good. They asked about you." Roman raised an eyebrow. "What did you tell them?" "That you're kind." "That's a lie." "No, it's not." She looked at him seriously. "You've been kind to me. That counts for something." Roman didn't know how to respond to that, so he didn't. One afternoon, he found her in the library again, but this time she wasn't reading. She was standing by the shelves, running her fingers along the spines of the books. "Looking for something?" he asked. She turned, startled. "No, just looking." Roman walked over, stopping beside her. "Pick one. Anyone you want." "Why?" "Because you should have something to do besides stare out windows and wander around." Serafina smiled slightly. "I like wandering around." "Then wander with a book." She laughed, and the sound was so unexpected that Roman froze. It was the first time he'd heard her laugh, and it changed her entire face, made her look lighter, younger. "What?" she asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing, just you should do that more often." "What, laugh?" "Yeah." Her smile faded a little. "I haven't had much to laugh about lately." "Then we'll have to change that." Serafina looked at him like she was trying to figure out if he was serious. Roman wasn't even sure himself. All he knew was that he wanted to see that smile again. That night, Roman broke his own rule. Instead of taking the couch, he lay down on the far side of the bed, keeping as much distance between them as possible. Serafina tensed when she realized what he was doing, but she didn't say anything. They lay there in the dark, neither of them speaking. Roman stared at the ceiling, hyper-aware of every breath she took, every small movement. "Roman?" Her voice was soft. "Yeah?" "Why are you doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being decent. You could have just followed the contract, taken what you paid for, but you didn't." Roman turned his head to look at her, though he could barely make out her features in the darkness. "Because you deserve better than that." "I'm nothing. I'm just—" "You're not nothing," he interrupted, his voice firm. "Don't ever say that." Serafina went quiet, and Roman could feel the weight of everything unsaid between them. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but he didn't. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "Good night, Serafina," he said. "Good night." Roman closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but all he could think about was the woman lying next to him and the growing realization that she was becoming more than just a name on a contract. She was becoming someone he couldn't afford to lose. The shift happened gradually, so slowly that Roman didn't notice it at first. He started coming home earlier. He stopped working through dinner. He found excuses to be in whatever room Serafina was in, even if they didn't talk much. And at night, instead of the couch feeling like a sacrifice, the bed felt like the only place he wanted to be, even if they stayed on opposite sides with a canyon of space between them. 3 weeks into the marriage, Roman walked into the library and found Serafina crying. She was curled up in the armchair by the window, her knees pulled to her chest, tears streaming down her face. The book she'd been reading was on the floor, forgotten. When she heard him enter, she tried to wipe her eyes quickly, but it was too late. "What happened?" Roman asked, crossing the room in 3 long strides. "Nothing. I'm fine." "You're not fine. What's wrong?" Serafina shook her head, her breath hitching. "It's stupid." Roman knelt down in front of her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Tell me anyway." She looked at him for a long moment, her eyes red and swollen. "I called my sister today. She's turning 16 next month, and she was telling me about this dress she wanted for her birthday party. And I realized I'm not going to be there. I'm going to miss it." Roman's chest tightened. "Why would you miss it?" "Because I can't go back there. Not to that house. Not with my father." "Then we'll bring her here." Serafina blinked. "What?" "Your sister, your brother. We'll bring them here for her birthday. They can stay for the weekend. We've got plenty of room." "You'd do that?" "Why wouldn't I?" Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling now. "I don't understand you." "Join the club," Roman muttered. He reached out hesitantly and brushed a tear off her cheek with his thumb. The contact was brief, barely there, but it sent a jolt through him that he wasn't prepared for. Serafina's breath caught, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then Roman stood abruptly, putting distance between them. "I'll have Marcus make the arrangements," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Let me know what day works." "Roman, wait." But he was already walking out, his heart pounding harder than it should have been. Marcus cornered him in his office 20 minutes later. "You're losing it," Marcus said, shutting the door behind him. Roman didn't look up from the papers on his desk. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. You're getting attached." "I'm being decent. There's a difference." "Not in our world, there isn't." Marcus sat down across from him, his expression serious. "Roman, I've known you for almost 15 years. I've seen you make hard calls that would destroy most men. But this is different. She's my wife. She's a contract, a business arrangement. You said so yourself." Roman slammed his hand down on the desk, making Marcus jump. "Don't tell me what I said. I know what I said." "Then act like it, because right now you're making decisions based on feelings instead of strategy, and that's how people like us end up dead." Roman leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "Her sister's turning 16. She wants to be there. I'm making it happen. That's not about feelings. That's about keeping my wife from falling apart." "And why do you care if she falls apart?" The question hung in the air between them. Roman didn't have a good answer. Or maybe he did, and he just wasn't ready to say it out loud. "Because she's been through enough," he said finally, "and I'm the reason she's here instead of there. So yeah, I care. Deal with it." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine. I'll make the arrangements. But Roman, you need to be careful. The people we deal with, they'll see this as a weakness, and they'll use it against you. Let them try." Marcus left, and Roman sat alone in his office, staring at nothing. He knew Marcus was right. Getting attached was dangerous. But somewhere along the way, Serafina had stopped being just a contract, and he didn't know how to go back. The day of Serafina's sister's birthday party arrived faster than Roman expected. He'd had the staff prepare 2 of the guest rooms, and he'd arranged for a car to pick up Lily and James from their father's house. Serafina had been anxious all morning, pacing the hallway and checking her phone every 5 minutes. "They're going to love it here," Roman said, trying to reassure her. "You don't know that. What if they think it's too much? What if they feel uncomfortable? Then we'll make them comfortable. Stop worrying." But she couldn't. Roman could see it in the way she twisted her hands together, in the way she kept glancing toward the front door. When the car finally pulled up, she practically ran outside. Roman followed at a slower pace, hanging back to give them space. He watched as Serafina threw her arms around a tall, lanky teenage boy with dark hair and the same eyes as his sister. That had to be James. Behind him was a younger girl, maybe 15 or 16, with long brown hair and a shy smile. "Lily." "Sarah," Lily squealed, hugging her sister tight. "I can't believe we're actually here." "I missed you so much," Serafina said, her voice breaking. James pulled back and looked up at the house, his eyes going wide. "This place is insane." "It's a bit much, isn't it?" Serafina said, laughing. "A bit? Sarah, this is like something out of a movie." Serafina turned and saw Roman standing on the steps. Her smile faltered slightly, and he could see the nervousness creep back in. She gestured for him to come closer. "Lily, James, this is Roman, my husband." The words still sounded strange coming from her mouth. Roman stepped forward and extended his hand to James first. "Good to meet you," Roman said. James shook his hand, his grip firm but his eyes wary. "You too." Lily was less reserved. She looked Roman up and down, then smiled. "You're taller than I thought you'd be." Roman raised an eyebrow. "What did you think I'd be?" "I don't know. Older, maybe. Meaner looking?" "Lily," Serafina hissed, her face turning red. But Roman laughed. "It's fine. Come on, I'll show you around." The tour of the house took almost an hour. Lily asked a million questions, and James stayed quiet but observant, taking everything in. Roman found himself watching Serafina more than anything else. She was lighter around them, more animated. She laughed easily and teased her brother about his terrible taste in music. It was like seeing a different version of her, one that hadn't been weighed down by fear and obligation. That night, they had dinner in the main dining hall. The staff had outdone themselves: roasted lamb, garlic potatoes, fresh salad, and a chocolate cake for Lily's birthday. Candles flickered on the table, and for once, the massive room didn't feel so empty. Lily couldn't stop smiling. "This is the best birthday ever." "Wait until you see your present," Serafina said. "You got me a present?" "Of course I did. What kind of sister would I be if I didn't?" After dinner, Serafina handed Lily a wrapped box. The girl tore into it like a kid on Christmas morning, then gasped when she saw what was inside. It was the dress she'd mentioned on the phone, pale pink with delicate embroidery along the hem. "Sarah, how did you—" "I have my ways," Serafina said, smiling. Lily hugged her sister so hard they both almost fell over. Roman watched from across the table, something warm and unfamiliar settling in his chest. Later, after Lily and James had gone to bed, Roman found Serafina standing on the back terrace, looking out at the gardens. The night air was cool, and she had a shawl wrapped around her shoulders. "Thank you," she said when he stepped up beside her. "For what?" "For this. For letting them come. For the dress. For everything. You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do. You didn't have to do any of this, but you did anyway." Roman leaned against the railing close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "They're good kids." "They are. James is smart. He wants to go to college, study engineering. And Lily, she's got this big heart. She wants to save the world." "Sounds like someone else I know." Serafina glanced at him. "I don't want to save the world. I just want to protect the people I love." "Same thing." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Then Serafina spoke again, her voice quieter. "Can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." "Why did you really agree to this marriage? And don't say it was just business. I don't believe that anymore." Roman considered his answer carefully. "It was business at first. Your father's connections, the political leverage, all of that was real. But somewhere along the way, it stopped being just about that." "When?" "I don't know. Maybe when I saw you at the altar. Maybe when you looked at me like I was a monster and I realized I didn't want to be one. Not to you." Serafina turned to face him fully, her eyes searching his. "You're not a monster, Roman. You don't know what I've done. Maybe not. But I know what you haven't done. You haven't hurt me. You haven't forced me into anything. You've been patient and kind, and I don't think you realize how rare that is." Roman's throat tightened. He wanted to reach out, to close the distance between them, but he held back. "You deserve better than me." "What if I don't want better? What if I just want you?" The words hit him like a freight train. Roman stared at her, and in that moment he saw everything he'd been trying to deny. She wasn't just some scared girl anymore. She was Serafina, brave and fierce and softer than anyone in his world had a right to be. And he was falling for her so hard it terrified him. "Serafina, you don't have to say anything," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know." Before he could respond, she turned and walked back inside, leaving Roman alone on the terrace with his thoughts spinning out of control. The next morning, James cornered Roman in the study. "Can we talk?" the kid asked, his expression serious. Roman gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sure. What's on your mind?" James sat down, his hands clasped in his lap. I wanted to thank you for taking care of Sarah, for bringing us here. You don't have to thank me. She's my wife. It's what I'm supposed to do. Yeah, but not everyone does what they're supposed to do, especially not in our family. Roman leaned back in his chair. You talking about your father? James nodded. He's a coward. He sold Sarah to save himself, and he doesn't even feel bad about it. When we found out about the wedding, he acted like it was some big accomplishment, like he'd done her a favor. Roman's jaw tightened. What did Sarah say? Nothing. She never says anything bad about him, even though she should. She just smiled and told us she was happy, but I knew she wasn't. I could see it in her eyes. She was protecting you. I know, that's what she does. She's always protecting us, even when it costs her everything. James looked up, his eyes intense. So I need to know, are you going to take care of her, for real, not just because of some contract? Roman met the kid's gaze head on. Yes. You promise? I promise. James studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Because if you hurt her, I'll find a way to make you regret it. Roman almost smiled. The kid had guts. Fair enough. The weekend passed too quickly. Lily and James explored the estate, swam in the pool, and ate enough food to feed a small army. Serafina was radiant the entire time, and Roman found himself wishing they could stay longer. But Sunday evening came, and the car arrived to take them home. Serafina hugged them both for a long time, whispering things Roman couldn't hear. When they finally pulled away, Lily was crying, and James looked like he was trying hard not to. We'll visit again soon, Serafina promised. You better, Lily said, sniffling. Roman shook James's hand. Take care of your sister. You take care of ours, James shot back. Deal. As the car pulled away, Serafina stood on the front steps, waving until it disappeared from sight. Then her shoulders slumped and she wrapped her arms around herself. Roman stepped up beside her. You okay? Yeah. I just missed them already. They can come back anytime. You know that, right? She nodded but didn't say anything. Roman wanted to pull her into his arms, to offer some kind of comfort, but he didn't know if she'd want that. So he just stood there, close enough to let her know he wasn't going anywhere. That night, when they climbed into bed, Serafina didn't stay on her side. She moved closer, not quite touching, but close enough that Roman could feel the warmth radiating off her skin. Roman? She whispered into the darkness. Yeah? I meant what I said last night, about wanting you. Roman's heart stopped. Serafina, I know you think I deserve better, but I don't care about better. I care about you, about this, whatever this is. Roman turned onto his side to face her, even though he could barely make out her features in the dark. You don't know what you're saying. Yes, I do. I've had 3 weeks to think about it. 3 weeks of watching you be kind and patient and nothing like the man everyone warned me about. And I'm done being afraid. I'm done waiting for the other shoe to drop. This isn't a fairy tale, Serafina. I'm not some prince who's going to save you. I don't need you to save me. I just need you to stay. Roman reached out, his hand finding hers in the darkness. Their fingers intertwined, and the simple contact felt like the most intimate thing he'd ever experienced. I'm not going anywhere, he said. Promise? Promise. They lay there, hands clasped, and Roman felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd spent his entire life building walls, keeping people at arm's length, never letting anyone get close enough to hurt him. But Serafina had slipped past every defense without even trying, and now she was here, holding his hand in the dark, asking him to stay. And for the first time in his life, Roman wanted to. The days that followed were different. The distance between them evaporated, replaced by a tentative closeness that grew stronger with each passing hour. They talked more, laughed more. Roman found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone, about his childhood, about how he'd clawed his way up from nothing, about the choices he'd made that still haunted him. Serafina listened without judgment, her eyes soft and understanding. And when it was her turn, she told him about her mother's illness, about watching her fade away slowly, about the weight of being the oldest and feeling responsible for everyone. I thought I was done sacrificing, she said one night as they lay in bed. I thought marrying you was the last thing I'd have to give up. But it wasn't a sacrifice at all. It was a gift. I just didn't realize it at first. Roman turned to look at her, propping himself up on one elbow. How is being forced into a marriage a gift? Because it brought me here. To you. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. I'm happier now than I've been in years, even though you're stuck with me. Especially because I'm stuck with you. Roman reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering on her cheek. I don't deserve you. Stop saying that. It's true. It's not. You're a good man, Roman. You just don't want to admit it. Roman leaned in slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away. But she didn't. She met him halfway, her lips soft and warm against his. The kiss was gentle, tentative, nothing like the cold, perfunctory one they'd shared at the altar. This one was real. When they pulled apart, Serafina was smiling. Took you long enough. I was trying to be a gentleman. Well, you can stop trying now. Roman laughed, the sound surprising even himself. Noted. They kissed again, deeper this time, and Roman felt the last of his carefully constructed walls come crashing down. He was lost, completely and utterly lost, and for once, he didn't care. Later, as Serafina slept curled against his side, Roman stared up at the ceiling and thought about everything that had led him here. The violence, the betrayals, the choices that had made him into someone people feared. He'd built an empire on ruthlessness, but none of it meant anything compared to the woman sleeping in his arms. Marcus's warning echoed in his head. Getting attached was dangerous. It made you vulnerable. But as Roman looked down at Serafina's peaceful face, he realized he didn't care about the danger anymore. He'd face down anyone who tried to hurt her. He'd burn the whole world down if that's what it took to keep her safe. And maybe that made him a fool. But if loving her was foolish, then Roman was fine with being a fool. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows felt different now. Roman woke with Serafina still curled against him, her breathing soft and even, one hand resting on his chest. He'd slept better than he had in years, and for a moment he just lay there, memorizing the way she looked in the early light, peaceful, unguarded, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with appearances and everything to do with who she was. She stirred, her eyes fluttering open, and when she saw him watching her, she smiled. Not the forced smile she'd worn at the wedding or the polite one she gave the staff. A real smile, warm and genuine. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning. How long have you been awake?" "Not long." She shifted closer, her head finding the spot between his shoulder and chest that seemed made for it. "This is nice." "Yeah, it is." They stayed like that for a while, neither one wanting to break the spell. But eventually, the world intruded. Roman's phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he reached for it reluctantly. "Work?" Serafina asked. "Always." He glanced at the screen and frowned. 3 missed calls from Marcus and a text that just said, "We need to talk, now." Serafina must have noticed the shift in his expression because she sat up. "What's wrong?" "I don't know yet. I need to make a call." He got out of bed and stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind him. Marcus answered on the first ring. "Where have you been?" Marcus demanded. "Sleeping. What's going on?" "Your father-in-law's debt problem? It's not as solved as he made it seem." Roman's blood went cold. "Explain." "The guy he was borrowing from before you cleared everything, Viktor Kozlov, he's claiming the debt wasn't fully paid, says there was interest accrued that wasn't accounted for, and he's not interested in money anymore. He wants collateral." "What kind of collateral?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "The kind that involves your wife." Roman's grip on the phone tightened so hard he thought it might crack. "He's out of his mind if he thinks—" "I know, but he's not backing down. He sent word this morning, said if the debt isn't settled by the end of the week, he's coming to collect." "Let him try." "Roman, Victor isn't some small-time thug. He's got connections, resources. If he decides to make a move, then I'll make sure it's his last one." Marcus sighed. "I figured you'd say that. I've already started putting security measures in place. Extra men on the estate, surveillance upgrades. But you need to tell her. She has a right to know what's coming." Roman closed his eyes, his jaw clenching. "I will." "And Roman, be careful. This guy plays dirty." "So do I." He hung up and stood there for a moment, trying to calm the rage building in his chest. Someone was threatening Serafina. Someone thought they could use her as leverage, as a bargaining chip. And that someone was about to learn exactly why people feared the name Roman Vale. When he walked back into the bedroom, Serafina was sitting on the edge of the bed, already dressed. She looked up at him, concern etched on her face. "That bad?" she asked. Roman sat down beside her. "There's a problem with your father's debt." Her face went pale. "I thought you cleared it." "I did. But apparently the man he borrowed from has decided that wasn't enough. He's claiming there's still money owed, and he wants payment." "How much?" "It's not about the money. Not anymore." Serafina's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "He wants me. That's not going to happen." "Roman, listen to me." He turned to face her fully, his hands gripping hers. "No one is touching you. No one is taking you anywhere. I don't care who this guy thinks he is or what kind of power he has. You're mine, and I protect what's mine." Serafina's eyes searched his face. "Who is he?" "His name's Viktor Kozlov, Russian. Runs most of the illegal gambling and loan operations in the Eastern District. He's dangerous, but so am I." "What if he doesn't stop? What if—" "Then I'll make him stop. Permanently." The hardness in Roman's voice should have frightened her, but Serafina didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. "I don't want you getting hurt because of me," she whispered. "And I don't want you getting hurt at all. So we're going to handle this. Together." "What do we do?" "First, you stay here. The estate is secure. I've got men watching every entrance, every possible access point. Second, you don't leave without me or Marcus. And third, you trust me to handle this." Serafina nodded, but Roman could see the fear in her eyes. Not fear of him, but fear for him. It was a strange feeling, having someone worry about him. In his world, people feared him or resented him, but they didn't worry. "I need to meet with some people," Roman said. "Figure out what Victor's real angle is. But I'll be back before dark." "Promise?" "Promise." He kissed her forehead, then her lips, trying to pour every ounce of reassurance he had into that simple gesture. When he pulled away, she was still scared, but she was holding it together. "I'll be fine," she said, like she was trying to convince herself as much as him. "I know you will." Roman met with Marcus and 3 of his most trusted associates in a warehouse across town. The building was nondescript from the outside, but inside it housed everything they needed for this kind of conversation: soundproofing, security, and complete privacy. "What do we know about Victor's movements?" Roman asked, standing at the head of the table. One of the men, a stocky guy named Dmitri, pulled up a file. "He's been making rounds, talking to people who owe him money, putting pressure on them, but he hasn't made any direct moves toward the estate yet." "He's testing the waters," Marcus said, "seeing if you'll blink first. He'll be waiting a long time." "What about the father?" another man asked. "Hale. Is he involved in this?" Roman's expression darkened. "I don't know yet, but I'm about to find out." An hour later, Roman walked into a downtown bar where Richard Hale was nursing what looked like his 3rd whiskey of the afternoon. The man looked worse than Roman remembered, his face puffy and red, his suit wrinkled. He glanced up when Roman approached, and something like fear flickered across his features. "Roman, I wasn't expecting—" "We need to talk." Roman slid into the booth across from him. "Viktor Kozlov." Hale's face went gray. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me. I paid off your debts, every single one. So why is Victor claiming you still owe him?" There were some additional costs. Interest, penalties for late payment, which should have been covered in the original agreement. Hale took a long drink, avoiding Roman's eyes. "Victor doesn't see it that way." Roman leaned forward, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "What did you do?" "I didn't do anything. He said the debt was bigger than I thought, that there were conditions I didn't know about. And one of those conditions involves my wife." Hale's hand trembled as he set down his glass. He said if I couldn't pay, he'd take something of equal value." "And you told him about Serafina?" "No, I swear I didn't." Roman's hand shot out and grabbed Hale by the collar, yanking him halfway across the table. "You sold your daughter once. If you did it again, I swear I didn't. Victor already knew. He knew about the marriage, about the contract. He said it was convenient, that you'd taken something that belonged to him." Roman released him, disgust curling in his gut. "She never belonged to him." "I know, but he doesn't see it that way. He sees her as collateral, as property. Then he's dead. Hale's eyes widened. Roman, you can't. Victor's connected. If you go after him, I don't care who he's connected to. He threatened my wife. That's a death sentence. Roman stood and walked out, leaving Hale slumped in the booth. Outside, Marcus was waiting by the car. Well? Marcus asked. He's useless. But Victor's the real problem. He thinks Serafina's his property, and he's not going to let this go. So what's the plan? We end it. Tonight. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Moving this fast could start a war. Then let it start. I'm not letting this drag out and put her in danger. They drove back to the estate in silence, Roman's mind already working through the logistics. Victor operated out of a club on the east side, a place called the Red Room. It was heavily guarded, but not impenetrable. Roman had taken down bigger operations with less intel. When they pulled through the gates, Serafina was standing on the front steps, her arms wrapped around herself. Relief flooded her face when she saw him, and she ran down to meet him. You're back, she said, her voice breaking slightly. Told you I would be. Roman pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. Over her shoulder, he saw Marcus give him a look that clearly said, You're in deep, and Roman didn't care. That night, after dinner, Roman found Serafina in the library again. She was staring out the window, not reading, just lost in thought. He walked up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. This mess with Victor, my father, how I got here, how you got here. Regretting it? She turned in his arms to face him. No, not for a second. I just wish... She trailed off, her eyes searching his face. What? I wish we'd met differently, under normal circumstances, without all the contracts and debts and danger. Roman brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. If we'd met under normal circumstances, I probably would have scared you off. I don't think so. I think I would have seen through all the scary parts to the person underneath. Eventually. You give me too much credit. And you don't give yourself enough. They stood there, wrapped in each other, and Roman felt the weight of what he was about to do settle over him. Tonight, he was going to end Viktor Kozlov. He was going to walk into that club and make sure the threat was eliminated permanently. It was the only way to keep Serafina safe, but he didn't tell her that. Not yet. Instead, he kissed her, slow and deep, trying to memorize everything about this moment, the way she tasted, the way she felt pressed against him, the small sound she made when he pulled her closer. When they finally pulled apart, she was breathless. What was that for? She asked. Just because? She smiled, and Roman committed that smile to memory too, because tonight he was going to become the monster everyone already thought he was, and he needed to remember why. Later, after Serafina had fallen asleep, Roman slipped out of bed and got dressed in the dark. He pulled on a black shirt, dark jeans, and grabbed the gun he kept in the safe in his closet. Marcus was waiting for him downstairs with 3 other men. You ready for this? Marcus asked. I've been ready. They drove through the city in 2 cars, no headlights, nothing that would draw attention. The Red Room was exactly what Roman expected. Neon lights, a line of people waiting to get in, and 2 massive bouncers at the door. But they weren't going through the front. They parked 2 blocks away and approached from the back, through an alley that smelled like garbage and stale beer. One of Roman's men picked the lock on the service entrance, and they slipped inside. The club was loud, music pounding through the walls. Roman moved through the back corridors with practiced ease, Marcus at his side. They passed storage rooms and offices until they found what they were looking for, a set of stairs leading up to the private rooms on the 2nd floor. Victor's office was at the end of the hall. 2 guards stood outside, but they didn't see Roman coming until it was too late. Marcus took out one with a silence shot, and Roman handled the other with his hands, snapping the man's neck before he could shout. They dragged the bodies into a nearby room and then kicked open Victor's door. The man himself was sitting behind a massive desk, a cigar in one hand and a glass of vodka in the other. He looked up, startled, and then his expression shifted to something like amusement. Roman Vale, I was wondering when you'd show up. We need to talk, Roman said, stepping into the room. Marcus closed the door behind them. Victor leaned back in his chair, completely unfazed by the gun in Roman's hand. About your wife? Beautiful girl. I can see why you'd want to keep her. She's not yours. She never was. That's where you're wrong. Her father owed me. And when he couldn't pay, she became collateral. Those were the terms. Then the terms are void. I paid the debt. You paid what he told you, but he lied. Or maybe he just didn't understand the full extent of what he owed. Either way, I'm still owed. Roman raised the gun, aiming it directly at Victor's head. You're owed nothing, and if you come near her again, I'll kill you. Victor smiled, a cold, reptilian thing. You think you're the first man to threaten me? I've been in this business longer than you've been alive, boy. I've survived worse than you. Then you're about to meet something worse than you've ever survived. Roman's finger tightened on the trigger, but before he could fire, the door burst open behind them. 4 of Victor's men stormed in, guns raised. Roman and Marcus spun, taking cover behind a leather couch as bullets tore through the air. Should have known it wouldn't be that easy, Marcus muttered, returning fire. Roman's mind raced. They were outnumbered and outgunned. Victor was already moving toward a back exit, and if he got away, this whole thing would be for nothing. Serafina would never be safe. Cover me, Roman said. You're insane, Marcus shot back, but he laid down suppressive fire anyway. Roman broke from cover, sprinting across the room. One of Victor's men caught him with a shot that grazed his shoulder, but Roman barely felt it. He tackled Victor just as the man reached the door, and they went down hard, rolling across the floor. Victor was older but vicious, pulling a knife from his belt and slashing at Roman's face. Roman jerked back, the blade missing by inches, and then drove his fist into Victor's throat. The man gasped, his grip loosening, and Roman yanked the knife away and drove it into Victor's chest. Victor's eyes went wide, blood bubbling at his lips. You'll regret this. No, Roman said, his voice cold. I won't. He twisted the knife and Victor went still. Behind him, Marcus had taken down the last of Victor's men. The office was a mess. Broken furniture, bullet holes in the walls, bodies on the floor. Roman stood slowly, his shoulder throbbing, blood soaking through his shirt. We need to move, Marcus said. Someone heard that firefight. They were out of the building in under 2 minutes, running through the alley and back to the cars. Sirens wailed in the distance as they peeled away from the curb, disappearing into the night. Roman didn't speak during the drive back. He just pressed his hand against the wound on his shoulder, trying to stem the bleeding, his mind already on Serafina. He needed to get home. He needed to see her, to make sure she was safe. When they pulled through the gates of the estate, the sun was starting to rise. Marcus helped Roman inside through a side entrance, and they went straight to Roman's office, where they kept a medical kit. Sit, Marcus ordered, and for once Roman didn't argue. Marcus cleaned the wound. It was deep, but had missed anything vital, and stitched it up with the efficiency of someone who'd done this too many times before. Roman gritted his teeth through the pain, refusing to make a sound. You're lucky, Marcus said. Another inch to the left and you'd be dead. Luck had nothing to do with it. Maybe not. But you took a hell of a risk tonight. What if it hadn't worked? What if Victor had gotten away? He didn't. But what if he had? Roman looked up at him. Then I would have kept hunting him until he was dead. I wasn't going to let him threaten her, Marcus. Not for one more second. Marcus finished the last stitch and sat back. You really love her, don't you? Yeah, I do. Then I hope she knows what she's got. Because most men in your position wouldn't have risked everything for someone they barely knew a few months ago. She's not just someone, she's everything. Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. You're a different man than you were before she came along. Is that a bad thing? No, I think it's the best thing that ever happened to you. Roman stood, testing his shoulder. It hurt, but it would heal. He changed into a fresh shirt and then headed upstairs. The bedroom door was slightly ajar, and he pushed it open quietly. Serafina was still asleep, curled up on her side, her face peaceful. Roman stood there for a moment, just watching her breathe, feeling the weight of what he'd done settle over him. He'd killed a man tonight, ended a life without hesitation, and he'd do it again in a heartbeat if it meant keeping her safe. He slipped into bed beside her, careful not to wake her, but she stirred anyway. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw him, she smiled. Roman? Her voice was groggy. What time is it? Early. Go back to sleep. But she was already more awake, her hand reaching out to touch his face. Then she saw the way he was favoring his shoulder, the slight wince when he moved. You're hurt, she said, sitting up quickly. It's nothing, just a scratch. Roman, don't lie to me. What happened? He looked at her, and he knew he couldn't lie, not to her. I took care of Victor. Her eyes went wide. Took care of... Understanding dawned, and her face went pale. You killed him. He wasn't going to stop, and I wasn't going to let him hurt you. Serafina's hand trembled as it hovered over his shoulder. You got shot. Grazed. Marcus stitched me up. I'm fine. You could have died. But I didn't. She pulled back, her eyes filling with tears. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep putting yourself in danger for me. Yes, I can, and I will, every single time. Roman, listen to me. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands. I would rather die protecting you than live knowing I let someone hurt you. Do you understand that? You're not just some contract to me anymore. You're not just my wife. You're the reason I wake up in the morning. You're the reason I want to be better. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe, even if it means becoming the monster everyone thinks I am. Tears streamed down Serafina's face, but she didn't look away. You're not a monster. I killed a man tonight, Serafina, in cold blood. I drove a knife into his chest and didn't feel a thing except relief that he couldn't hurt you anymore. If that's not a monster, I don't know what is. It's love, she whispered. Twisted and violent and terrifying, but it's love. And She took a shaky breath. I love you too. Even the parts that scare me. Even the parts you think make you unworthy. I love all of it. All of you. Roman's throat tightened, and for the second time in his life, he felt tears sting his eyes. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as tight as his injured shoulder would allow, and she clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world that kept trying to pull her under. I'm sorry, he said into her hair. I'm sorry you got dragged into this. I'm sorry your life is dangerous because of me. Don't apologize. I chose this. I chose you. And I'd do it again. They stayed like that until the sun was fully up, neither one willing to let go. And when they finally pulled apart, Serafina looked at him with so much love and trust that Roman felt something fundamental shift inside him. He'd spent his whole life building walls to keep people out, to protect himself from being hurt. But Serafina had climbed over every single one of those walls without even trying, and now she was here, seeing him for exactly what he was, broken and violent and capable of terrible things, and loving him anyway. And that, Roman realized, was worth more than any empire he could ever build. The days after Victor's death were strange. Roman had expected retaliation, some kind of blowback from Victor's associates or the people he'd been connected to. But nothing came. Marcus dug into it, made calls, asked questions, and what he found was almost funny in its simplicity. Nobody liked him, Marcus reported one afternoon, standing in Roman's office. Victor had enemies everywhere. Half the people who worked with him were looking for an excuse to cut ties. When word got out he was dead, most of them just shrugged and moved on. Roman leaned back in his chair, his shoulders still tender but healing. So we're clear? Looks like it. A few of his old lieutenants are scrambling to grab territory, but none of them are interested in revenge. They're too busy fighting each other. Good. Keep monitoring it, but it sounds like the threat's over. Marcus nodded, then hesitated. How's she doing? Roman knew exactly who he meant. She's okay, shaken, but okay. And you? What about me? You killed a man, boss. That's not nothing, even for you. Roman looked down at his hands. They were clean now, but he could still remember the feeling of Victor's blood, warm and sticky. I did what I had to do. I know, I'm just saying, it's okay if it bothers you. It doesn't bother me that he's dead. It bothers me that it came to that in the first place, that Serafina had to live through being threatened because of her father's mistakes. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You know what the difference is between you and most of the people we deal with? What? You actually give a damn about the collateral damage. Most guys in your position would have just handled it and never thought twice about how it affected anyone else. But you care. And that's either going to save you or destroy you. I haven't figured out which yet. After Marcus left, Roman sat alone in his office, thinking about what he'd said. The truth was, killing Victor hadn't bothered him the way it probably should have. What bothered him was knowing that the world he lived in, the life he'd built, would always put Serafina in danger. And he couldn't change that. Not completely. All he could do was be ready when the next threat came, and hope that being ready was enough. That evening, he found Serafina in the garden, kneeling by the roses she'd planted a few weeks ago. She looked peaceful, her hands in the dirt, the setting sun casting everything in gold. When she heard him approach, she looked up and smiled. "They're growing well," she said, gesturing to the new blooms. Roman sat down on the bench nearby, watching her work. "You've got a gift for this. It's just patience. Plants don't need much except time and attention." Sounds familiar. She glanced at him, understanding in her eyes. "How's your shoulder?" "Better. Barely hurts anymore." "You're a terrible liar." Roman smiled despite himself. "Fine. It still hurts. But I'll live." Serafina stood and brushed the dirt from her hands, then came to sit beside him. For a while they just sat there in comfortable silence, watching the sky turn from orange to pink to deep purple. "I've been thinking," Serafina said finally, "about my father." Roman tensed. "What about him?" "I want to see him, talk to him." "Serafina, I know what you're going to say, that he doesn't deserve it, that he's the reason all of this happened, and you're right. But he's still my father, and I need to understand why. Why he made the choices he did. Why he thought selling me was the answer." Roman wanted to argue, to tell her that seeing Richard Hale would only hurt her more, but he also knew that Serafina needed this, needed closure or answers, or whatever it was she was searching for. "Okay," he said, "but I'm coming with you." "You don't have to." "Yes, I do. I'm not letting you face him alone." She reached for his hand, threading their fingers together. "Thank you." They arranged the meeting for the following week at a coffee shop downtown, neutral territory where neither Serafina nor her father would feel too uncomfortable. Roman sat 2 tables away, close enough to intervene if needed, but far enough to give them privacy. Marcus was outside in the car, just in case. Richard Hale looked even worse than the last time Roman had seen him. His hands shook as he stirred sugar into his coffee, and he couldn't seem to meet Serafina's eyes for more than a few seconds at a time. "Thank you for meeting me," Serafina said, her voice steady. "Of course. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me." "I wasn't sure either, but I needed to ask you something." Hale nodded, waiting. "Why?" Serafina's voice cracked slightly. "Why did you do it? Why did you sell me to pay off your debts?" Hale's face crumpled, and for a moment Roman thought the man might actually cry. "I didn't know what else to do. The people I owed, they were going to kill me. They were going to go after you and James and Lily if I didn't pay. I thought if I could just make a deal, if I could find someone powerful enough to clear everything, then at least you'd all be safe." "Safe?" Serafina's laugh was bitter. "You think I was safe? You handed me over to a stranger, to a man you knew was dangerous, and you thought that was keeping me safe. I knew Roman wouldn't hurt you. I'd heard things about him, about how he operated. He's ruthless, but he's not cruel. Not like Victor, not like the others. You didn't know that. You gambled with my life because you were too much of a coward to face your own mistakes." Hale flinched. "You're right. I was a coward. I am a coward, and I've regretted it every single day since." "Regret doesn't fix anything." "I know. But I want you to know that I never stopped loving you. Even when I made the worst decision of my life, even when I put you in danger, I was trying to protect you. I did it all wrong." Serafina was silent for a long moment, her jaw tight. Roman could see the struggle in her eyes, the war between the daughter who wanted to forgive and the woman who knew she deserved better. "I can't forgive you," she said finally. "Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I need you to understand something. I didn't survive this because of you. I survived in spite of you. Roman gave me a choice when you never did. He made me feel safe when you made me feel like property. So if you really love me, if you really regret what you did, then you'll accept that I might never be able to let this go." Hale nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I understand." Serafina stood and Roman immediately rose from his table. She walked toward him without looking back, and Roman put his arm around her shoulders, guiding her out of the coffee shop. Behind them, Richard Hale sat alone at his table, a broken man mourning a relationship he'd destroyed with his own hands. In the car, Serafina was quiet. Roman didn't push her to talk, just held her hand while Marcus drove them back to the estate. It wasn't until they were home, sitting in the library, that she finally spoke. I thought I'd feel better after confronting him, but I just feel empty. That's normal, Roman said. Closure doesn't always make things hurt less. Sometimes it just helps you understand the hurt better. Did you ever confront your father about the things he did? Roman had never talked much about his childhood, about the man who'd raised him with fists and cruelty. No, he died before I got the chance. And honestly, I don't know if I would have. Some people don't deserve the energy it takes to confront them. Do you think that's true for my father? I think only you can answer that. But for what it's worth, I think you were incredibly brave today. You stood up to him, told him the truth, and you didn't let him off the hook. That takes strength. Serafina leaned against him, and Roman wrapped his good arm around her. I just want to move forward. I'm tired of being defined by his mistakes. Then we'll move forward, together. And they did. Over the next few months, Serafina threw herself into building a life that was entirely her own. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women who'd been in situations like hers, trapped by circumstance, forced into impossible choices. She was good at it, patient and empathetic in ways that Roman could never be. She also started talking about going back to school. She'd dropped out of college when her mother got sick, and she'd never had the chance to finish. What would you study? Roman asked one night over dinner. Social work, maybe, or counseling, something where I could actually help people. You'd be great at that. You think so? I know so. You helped me, didn't you? She smiled. You helped me too. Roman enrolled her in the local university that fall, covering tuition and everything else she needed. Watching her walk to class that first day, backpack slung over her shoulder and a nervous excitement in her eyes, Roman felt something settle in his chest. Pride, maybe. Or just the deep satisfaction of seeing someone he loved become exactly who they were meant to be. Lily and James visited regularly now, and Roman had quietly set up trust funds for both of them. James was thriving at his engineering program, and Lily had decided she wanted to be a teacher. They were good kids, smart and kind, and Roman found himself caring about their futures almost as much as he cared about Serafina's. One weekend, while they were visiting, James pulled Roman aside. Can I talk to you about something? Sure, what's up? James looked nervous, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for me and Lily, for Sarah. You didn't have to, but you did anyway. Your family, that's what family does. I know, but I also know that you didn't sign up for all of this. You married Sarah because of a contract, and now you're taking care of all of us. That's more than most people would do. Roman thought about that. Your sister changed my life. She made me want to be better than I was. Taking care of you and Lily isn't a burden. It's a privilege. James nodded, blinking rapidly. Well, I just wanted you to know that I see it, what you've done for us, and I'm grateful. You're a good kid, James. Your sister's proud of you. So am I. That night, after Lily and James had gone to bed, Roman and Serafina sat on the back terrace, wrapped in blankets against the cool autumn air. James talked to you today, Serafina said. It wasn't a question. He did. What did he say? Just that he's grateful for everything. Serafina smiled. He looks up to you, you know. Both of them do. You're the father figure they never really had. The word hit Roman harder than he expected. Father. He'd never thought of himself that way, never imagined he'd be anyone's role model. But looking at Serafina, seeing the warmth in her eyes, he realized she was right. I'm not sure I'm qualified for that job, he said. You're more qualified than you think. You show up. You care. You protect the people you love. That's what matters. Roman pulled her closer, and they sat there in comfortable silence, watching the stars. He thought about the man he used to be, the one who measured success in power and fear, who kept everyone at arm's length because connection meant vulnerability. That man was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned that the things worth protecting couldn't be measured or controlled. They could only be loved. 6 months later, Roman made a decision that shocked everyone, including himself. He stepped back from the more dangerous aspects of his business. He handed off territories to trusted lieutenants, sold off operations that were too risky, and focused on the legitimate ventures he'd been building on the side. Real estate, investments, consulting. Things that didn't require him to look over his shoulder every second of every day. Marcus was the first to notice. You're really doing this, he said. standing in Roman's office as Roman signed the last of the transfer paperwork. Yeah, I am. Why now? Roman set down his pen and looked up. Because I'm tired of living like every day might be my last. I'm tired of putting Serafina in danger just by being who I am. And I'm tired of being the guy everyone's afraid of instead of the guy people respect. You can be both. Maybe, but I don't want to be. Not anymore. Marcus shook his head, but he was smiling. She really did a number on you, didn't she? Yeah, she did. And I'm better for it. When Roman told Serafina what he'd done, she cried. Happy tears this time, the kind that came from relief and hope and the knowledge that maybe, just maybe, they could have a normal life. You didn't have to do this, she said. Yes, I did. I want a future with you, Serafina. A real one. Not one where I'm constantly looking over my shoulder or worrying about who's coming after us next. I want to wake up next to you every morning and know that the biggest problem we're facing is what to have for breakfast. She laughed through her tears. That sounds perfect. It does, doesn't it? They got married again a year later. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. A small ceremony in the garden at the estate, just family and a few close friends. No contracts, no obligations, no hidden agendas. Just two people who'd found each other in the middle of chaos and decided to build something beautiful. Serafina wore a simple white dress, nothing like the elaborate gown from their first wedding. Roman wore a suit, but no tie, because Serafina said she liked him better that way. A little less polished, a little more real. When they exchanged vows, Roman's voice was steady. I promise to choose you every day, to protect you, to support you, to love you even when it's hard. You saved me, Serafina, from myself, from the life I thought I was supposed to live. And I'll spend the rest of my life being worthy of that. Serafina's vows were simpler but no less powerful. I promise to stand beside you, to challenge you when you need it, and to remind you that you're more than the worst things you've ever done. I love you, Roman, not in spite of who you are, but because of it. All of it. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause, and Roman felt something he hadn't felt in years. Joy. Pure, uncomplicated joy. The reception was everything their first one wasn't. Warm, full of laughter, real. Lily and James gave speeches that made everyone cry. Marcus made a toast that was equal parts sarcastic and sincere. And Richard Hale, who'd been invited at Serafina's insistence, sat quietly in the back, watching his daughter with something like wonder. Later, as the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Richard approached Serafina. Thank you for letting me come, he said quietly. I'm glad you did, Serafina replied, and Roman could tell she meant it. You look happy, really happy. I am. Richard nodded, his eyes damp. That's all I ever wanted for you. I just went about it all wrong. You did, but I'm okay now. We're okay now. Richard looked at Roman, then back at his daughter. Take care of her. Every day, Roman said. After Richard left, Serafina turned to Roman. That felt good, letting him be part of this. Forgiveness looks good on you. I'm not sure it's forgiveness, but it's something. Peace, maybe. Peace is good. They danced under the stars, just the two of them, the estate quiet around them. And as Roman held Serafina in his arms, swaying to music only they could hear, he realized that this was what he'd been searching for his whole life. Not power or control or respect. Just this. Just her. The years that followed were quieter, but fuller. Serafina finished her degree and started working as a counselor, helping women transition out of abusive situations. She was brilliant at it, fierce and compassionate in equal measure. Roman supported her work, donated to the organizations she cared about, and occasionally sat in on her talks to groups of young women about resilience and survival. Lily became a teacher, just like she'd planned, and married a kind man who taught history at the same school. James finished his engineering degree and got a job with a firm that designed sustainable infrastructure. Both of them stayed close, visiting regularly and calling Serafina whenever they needed advice or just wanted to talk. Roman and Marcus remained partners, but their focus shifted entirely to legitimate business. They built an empire that didn't require violence or fear, just smart decisions and hard work. It was strange at first, operating in the daylight instead of the shadows. But Roman found he liked it, liked being someone people came to because they trusted him, not because they were afraid of him. 5 years into their marriage, Serafina came to Roman with news that changed everything. "I'm pregnant," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Roman's world stopped. "What?" "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she laughed and told him to ease up. "Are you sure?" "I took 3 tests. I'm sure." Roman sat down heavily, the reality sinking in. A baby. His baby. Their baby. The idea terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. "I don't know how to be a father," he said. "You've been a father figure to James and Lily for years. You'll figure it out." "That's different. This is my kid. What if I screw it up?" Serafina knelt in front of him, her hands on his knees. "You won't, because you care. And because I'll be right there with you, figuring it out together." The pregnancy wasn't easy. Serafina dealt with morning sickness, exhaustion, and 100 other symptoms that made Roman feel helpless. But he was there for every appointment, every craving, every moment she needed him. And when their daughter was born, a tiny, screaming bundle with Roman's dark hair and Serafina's eyes, he knew he'd never been more terrified or more in love. They named her Elena, after Serafina's mother. And as Roman held his daughter for the first time, feeling her tiny fingers wrap around his thumb, he made her a silent promise. He promised to be better than his own father, to give her a life filled with love and safety and every opportunity she could want, to teach her that strength came from kindness, not cruelty, and to make sure she never doubted, not for a single second, that she was loved. Watching Serafina with Elena was like watching something sacred. She was patient and gentle, singing lullabies and rocking their daughter to sleep with a tenderness that made Roman's chest ache. And when Elena smiled for the first time, a gummy, toothless grin that lit up her whole face, Roman felt something shift inside him. This was what mattered, not the empire he'd built or the reputation he'd earned. Just this. Just his family. Lily and James were over the moon about being an aunt and uncle. They visited constantly, spoiling Elena with gifts and attention. Marcus, to everyone's surprise, was incredible with the baby, holding her with surprising gentleness and making faces that sent her into fits of giggles. "Never thought I'd see the day," Roman said, watching Marcus cradle Elena. "Neither did I," Marcus admitted. "But she's pretty great. You did good, boss." "We did good," Roman corrected, glancing at Serafina. 10 years after that first wedding, Roman looked around at the life he'd built and barely recognized the man he used to be. The estate was filled with laughter now. Elena's friends running through the halls, Lily bringing her own kids over for visits, James stopping by with his wife and their newborn son. Serafina's foundation had helped thousands of families, and she showed no signs of slowing down. Roman's business was thriving, all of it legitimate, all of it built on hard work instead of fear. He'd left the underworld behind completely, and while his reputation still opened doors, it was respect that kept them open now, not intimidation. One evening, as he and Serafina watched Elena play in the garden with her cousins, Serafina turned to him. "Do you ever miss it? The old life?" Roman thought about it. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it, knowing who the enemy was, having clear rules, but no, I don't miss it. This is better." "Even with all the chaos?" She gestured to the kids running around, screaming with laughter. "Especially with all the chaos. This is real. The other stuff was just survival." Serafina leaned against him, and Roman wrapped his arm around her shoulders. They'd come so far from that terrified girl at the altar and the cold man who'd married her. They'd built something real, something that mattered, and it had transformed them both. Because that's what love did. It didn't erase the past or fix everything that was broken. But it gave you a reason to be better, to keep trying, to believe that tomorrow could be different than yesterday. And Roman had learned that the hard way. He'd spent his whole life chasing power, thinking that control and fear would keep him safe. But it was vulnerability that saved him. It was letting Serafina in, letting her see all the broken, ugly parts of him and choosing to love him anyway. It was accepting that being strong didn't mean being invulnerable. It meant being brave enough to let someone else carry some of the weight. And Serafina had carried more than her share. She'd walked into his life as a sacrifice and become his salvation. She'd softened his edges without making him weak. She'd given him a family, a purpose, and a reason to believe that even the darkest beginnings could lead to beautiful endings. As the sun set over the estate, casting everything in shades of gold and amber, Roman pulled Serafina closer. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For saving me, for loving me, for giving me this." She smiled, the same smile that had first made him realize he was in trouble all those years ago. "You saved me too, you know. You gave me a choice when no one else did. You made me feel like I mattered. You do matter. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." "Right back at you." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, watching their daughter play and listening to the sounds of family all around them. And Roman realized that this messy, chaotic, beautiful life was everything he'd never known he wanted. He'd started as a man who believed power was everything, who thought vulnerability was weakness, and love was a liability. But Serafina had taught him differently. She'd shown him that the strongest thing you could do was let someone in, that real power came from choosing to be kind when you could just as easily be cruel. That love wasn't a liability, it was the only thing worth building your life around. And Roman had built a life, not an empire based on fear, but a family based on choice. Every morning, he chose Serafina. Every day, he chose to be better than he was. Every night, he came home to a house filled with laughter and love, and he knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Because, in the end, that's what it all came down to. Choices. Richard Hale had made terrible ones, and they'd nearly destroyed his family. Roman had made better ones, and they'd saved his. And every day forward was another chance to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, growth over stagnation. That night, after Elena was asleep and the house was quiet, Roman and Serafina lay in bed together, talking about nothing and everything. "Do you think she'll understand someday?" Serafina asked. "Elena? About how we started? I think we'll tell her the truth, that her parents found each other in a complicated way, but they chose to build something real. That love isn't always easy, but it's always worth it. That's a good lesson. You taught it to me." Serafina turned to face him, her eyes soft in the dim light. "We taught it to each other, and that was the truth of it. They'd both been broken in different ways, both carrying scars that would never fully heal. But they'd found each other, and they'd chosen to build something better. Not perfect, nothing ever was, but real and lasting and worth every struggle it took to get there." Roman kissed her forehead, then her lips, and pulled her close. And as he drifted off to sleep with Serafina in his arms, he felt that same deep peace he'd discovered years ago. The peace that came from being loved completely and loving someone the same way in return. It was the kind of peace he'd spent his whole life searching for, never knowing it was right there all along, waiting for him to be brave enough to reach out and take it. And now that he had it, Roman knew he'd never let it go. Because some things were worth fighting for. Some things were worth dying for. And Serafina, their family, this life they'd built together, these were the things that mattered most. These were the things that transformed a cold, ruthless man into someone capable of tenderness, someone worthy of love. And if that wasn't a kind of redemption, Roman didn't know what was.